Hey everyone, happy Thursday on TLD Cast. I'm just here to say hi and just welcome you. So, if this is your first TLD Cast, we're the training, learning, and development community. We meet here a couple times a week to talk about issues that are really important to the learning and development community. So, when we're not here broadcasting, you can actually connect with us. We have a Slack page open that you can join in, and all of the sessions that are streamed from here are recorded. So you can actually access the recording from the same link that got you here. And today's topic, I think, is really important. I think there's a lot of folks that are dealing with this particular topic right now. And it's my pleasure to introduce my friend, my co host of the Instructional Redesign podcast, Joe Suarez, who's going to talk you through today and give you some really sound advice to really jumpstart kind of your job search if you are in the market, and really hoping to have engagement today. Want to hear your stories too about what you're doing and things that you are being impacted by. And with that, take it away, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kara. So yeah, like Kara said, this is going to be the first of a series of episodes for job seekers. And this one in particular is going to be talking about being laid off and what that looks like, what to expect, or if you suspect you're going to be laid off, how to handle things in the moment and how to move on immediately after, a few weeks after, etc. So yeah, let's get started. So the reason I'm here today, and I want to emphasize up front, is as far as this topic is concerned, I'm not anything really special other than just a learning and development professional who has seen and been through some things. In particular for today, I have witnessed companies let people go, and I've seen companies do that well. I've seen companies do that not so well. I've seen individuals handle that well, and individuals handle that not so well. And I didn't realize it, but that actually helped me a lot when it came to inevitably being laid off myself, which happened last month. So let's get started. This is me. You may have seen this picture when you entered here today in the banner for today's episode. So this is me last month, a year ago. It's hard to think now, but with this global pandemic happening, but this was my first time outside of North America. I'm on a European vacation. I traveled to 3 countries, and here you see me in the Alps outside of Salzburg, Austria, where The Sound of Music was filmed. And I show this picture in particular because exactly 1 year to the date, pretty much the same time, local time, my world was turned upside down. I was let go from my job that I had. Now, in between that year, what had happened was I took some risk. I said, you know what? I've been at this healthcare company for 7 years, and I want to try some other roles and see what's out there for me. I knew that was a risk when I did it. I didn't realize how much of a risk with leaving a company that part of what they do is making personal protective equipment. If I knew this global pandemic was happening, I might have stuck around a little longer. I also turned down a role at a big bank that maybe wasn't the best thing if I could have known what was coming. But anyway, I chose what I chose, and I knew the risks I was taking. And here we are today. So I wanted to get a poll going, but I kind of forgot to get to it. But maybe in the chat, you guys could just type what brings you here today as far as what you're expecting to get out of this. So I plan to talk about what, so maybe I should phrase it this way. Are you expecting that you might get laid off? Have you been laid off recently and you're looking for advice? Or what I'm hoping is there's some people in the chat that have been laid off in the past, they've moved on, and they have some advice that they can share to supplement what I'm going to talk about today. So for some reason, I'm not able to see the chat. I don't know what's going on, but Kara has offered to kind of volunteer and help me by typing some things into a Google Doc. So we are well prepared today. So I would really appreciate if you could kind of put some answers in the chat. That'd really help. And then periodically I will stop and go over those. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to talk about this is part one in a series. Our loose schedule, this might change, but I'm thinking about 4 different episodes. So obviously we're in episode 1 here of moving on after being let go. But I want to talk about what it looks like to be hunting for a job in learning and development right now. I just, by happenstance of applying to so many jobs and interviewing for so many jobs, feel like I'm almost a pro at this now. And if there's information that I can give out that helps others, just as a way to stay productive and to give back to people that are maybe impacted more than I have been through this process, that's something I want to do right now. It's the reason why I'm here today. Part of my job hunting process is something that I think could be valuable for people as far as how I look at or how I search through job boards, how I decide on applying for things, how I take notes, things like that. So that's what kind of stuff I want to cover in the next episode. Resume writing. I can't say I'm the most knowledgeable person when it comes to that, but I do have some tricks that I use when it comes to making sure your resume gets past ATS, which is the applicant tracking system that companies use. So these are the things that you have to log in and register an account for when you apply for a job. What's happening behind the scenes is there's a machine, a very low quality artificial intelligence type thing that's reading. It's almost like a web search from 2005 as far as like the keywords it's reading and stuff, but it goes over your resume, and if it sees the keywords it likes, it brings your resume to the top and gets it in front of a recruiter's eyes, which is what you really want. So writing a resume that's both ATS, robot friendly, and human friendly, looks visually appealing, is something I want to talk about in that episode. And then finally, interviewing. It's a process that it's good to know how that all works, the different phases of interviews, what to expect and what's good to ask, what to expect to be asked at the different stages of the interviews is what I want to talk about there. So that's what we tentatively have as our job hunting seeking series. Before I go any further, there are a few disclaimers I want to give out. The first is that I don't have all the answers, nor do I pretend to. I'm not a career coach or a professional resume writer, recruiter, anything like that. I don't have jobs I'm hiring for. I don't have inside info in places that are, so don't reach out to me about specific jobs. But I really am just, like I said, a fellow L&D professional that's in this community, that's been plugged into the TLDC community for a while. I haven't shown my face in a while because I've been in roles that have kept me pretty busy. I'm happy to be back and being able to share some stuff with you today. But basically, if you've been impacted or you suspect you're being impacted, I'm just another guy that's in the same boat that feels like he might have some wisdom to share. And if, like I said earlier, I'm really looking, I'm hoping that people that have been through this stuff and might also have some experience and wisdom to share can do so today in the chat. I'd really appreciate that. The next thing I need to say is I'm not a lawyer. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about today will be bordering on what sounds like legal advice. And I want to reassure everyone that I am not a lawyer. I don't even play one on TV. So remember that. And the final thing is, even though I'm going to be talking about being laid off, and even though I'm being open about the fact that I was laid off, I want to make sure that everyone knows that I'm not going to discuss any specific details of my layoff today, other than to say, yes, I was let go. It was due to the impacts of COVID-19, and it was last month. But I'm also going to be giving out a lot of hypothetical situations and scenarios about different layoffs or what might happen to you. Anything that I describe today that happens to resemble the details of my actual layoff are purely coincidental. And so I've emailed you all waivers. So if you could just sign those and return them, we can get started. No, just kidding. Those are my disclaimers for today. So I've basically broken this talk down into 3 segments. What to do before a layoff. Basically, there's a book for pregnant women that's called What to Expect When You're Expecting. We can think of this section as what to expect if you're suspecting that you may be about to be laid off, or your colleagues might be laid off, and maybe what you can do to help them. Then we're going to talk about actually being laid off. What happens in the moment, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what you should say, what you shouldn't say, that kind of thing. And then after, how do you move on immediately after, first few days, what you should be doing to kind of get yourself up back on your feet, and then how you just move over after that. Maybe it requires some kind of pivot to kind of adjust to this new normal that we're all going to be experiencing here soon. So those are what I'm going to talk about today. And let's start with what to do with before. First off, with warning signs. So here's my first question to everybody. For those of you that have been laid off, what were the warning signs that you saw ahead of time? Or maybe even something that you didn't realize was a warning sign until after the fact that you wish you would have realized was a red flag. So go ahead and type those into the chat. And if some good stuff comes up that Kara points out to me, I will be sure to read them. So let's break these down into kind of direct signs, pretty overt signs, and less direct, more subtle signs. So the most obvious ones are your company is in an area that's being negatively impacted by COVID-19. A great example would be the airline industry right now. In the US, I think it's like 50-60% of planes are just grounded. They're not going anywhere. And it makes no money from a business standpoint for airlines to fly a plane that isn't anywhere near full capacity. So they're really relying on government money right now. And if you're in the airline industry, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I don't know how else to say it, but you should be worried. Another sign is just, are the company financials looking good? Like what are things looking like right now? So pay attention to, even if it's something you don't normally pay attention to things like quarterly earning reports and things like that. How's the company doing? How are they being impacted? What's their stance on things? Things like that. Starting to get less direct and more subtle. You start to get some emails. Maybe it's announced company-wide or by business segment that bonuses are going to be pulled back, or raises are going to be canceled or recalled. That's a good warning sign. Maybe wages are going to start to be cut back. People are going to be furloughed. So you start to see these things. These are definitely obvious warning signs. Less obvious is you might get an email that encourages people to take paid time off. Now, why would that be a warning sign? Well, a lot of companies, and maybe even states require this. They will give a PTO. When I say PTO, paid time off, they will pay out your PTO balance when you leave a company. And if you're let go, obviously that counts as a termination. So anyone that's let go has to be paid out with their remaining PTO balance. And it might be in the company's interest to convince you to take some vacation ahead of being let go. That sounds like a shady thing, but it might be something they encourage you to do. And if you see that, that's a warning sign. Less subtle is when I worked in an office environment, one of the things I like to do was just walk around and observe what normal day-to-day business looks and sounds like when you're just out and about in the office environment. So what does it look like when people are conducting normal business? Are people looking stressed? Are they, joking and taking walks and that kind of, or maybe you start to see some differences. Maybe people are starting to whisper a little more, or have expressed some, it looks like they're a little frustrated in their conversations and things like that. Maybe the conversations are dying down, or maybe there's less people in the halls, this kind of thing. You can really kind of get the pulse of where the business is at just by kind of looking around and keeping your ear to the ground. A good people to talk to that really have a good sense of how that works are like receptionists, security guards at the front desk, things like that. They're the ones that they don't necessarily know what's happening day to day through the business, but they feel that energy and they can kind of sense when things are happening as well. Finally, you might just want to just talk to your manager directly, just pull them aside and try and have a frank conversation with them. Or if you don't really have that relationship or trust your manager, find somebody in a leadership position that you do trust and talk to them, and just try and get a sense from them where things are at, where things are headed, see how open and honest they'll be about it. They might be willing to share things with you. They might know things that they are not at liberty to share with you. So be alert for them dropping hints to you, either intentionally or unintentionally, and maybe watch their body language and read that as you can. Oh, okay. I didn't think comments were coming in, but there's another page of comments I didn't see. So let me start to read these that are coming in. People are saying that, their significant other was laid off. Not been laid off, but I've seen it happen to too many people that I care about. Absolutely. That's where I was previously, and it's definitely good to be prepared. Someone says, I've had the great misfortune to be laid off. No, I'm sorry. I've had the great misfortune to have to lay off 3 people. Separate from those, I've been fired due to compliance and performance. Yeah, so lots of people can relate to what's happening. And let me just say at this point, if you're going through this, or you've been through this, or you think you're going to go through it, I'm sorry this is happening to you. But I think first and foremost, we should all acknowledge that this is a traumatic experience that has the potential to be life-altering. So let's kind of first and foremost accept what it is and deal with it as such, and do our best that we can to move on and pivot into something better. Because I'm not the most optimistic person in the world, but I strongly feel that if people play their cards right, they can end up in a better position than where they were post layoff. And I know that, and I've actually seen people do that. I had a coworker, someone that was on my team, was laid off about a year ago, and she had been there for 5 years. So she got a nice severance of like 2 or 3 months, and she was able to find a new, better paying job within a month. So think about that. She now has more pay, and she basically got 2 months or so of double pay. She definitely made out in the end. So it takes a good pivot, but it can happen, and it takes a good attitude, but you can get there. So I sympathize with everybody, but keep your head up and stay productive, I guess would be my advice. All right, tons of comments. Some of the warning signs, you just hear it flat out. Layoffs are coming. And definitely the rumor mill is something to pay attention to, but in my experience, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because prior to some layoffs that I've been through and survived, the rumors were there. But the problem with rumors is it's not always, you don't always have the timing of when things are going to happen. So the rumor might just be layoffs are coming, but the actuality is leadership is thinking about that sometime in the next fiscal year or something like that. Or they actually were planning to do it, but it got postponed or something like that. So definitely pay attention to the rumor mill, but take it with a grain of salt. Someone says, working in IT of a big company, you can find out a lot of things beforehand. Yeah. I imagine many of those are not to company security, information security policies, but yes, I imagine you can in an IT department. Someone says, a complete shock and surprise at my organization. I wasn't laid off, but I'm still reeling from the experience. Yeah. Even if you're not laid off, even if you survive a layoff, it still can be very jarring. In really big companies, the P word, productivity, can clue you in real quick. Yeah. You start to see a drop in productivity. Yeah, for sure. Look for the weird budget cuts. A company I was in once removed our budget for Kleenex. Yeah. Shrinking budgets are always a bad sign, but if it gets to the point where no one's letting people blow their nose except into their hand, I guess, then that's a big problem. Someone says layoffs being traumatic, but opens to new opportunities. This is a great point. We often tend to devaluate our worth to our respective industries. We have far more potential beyond our current walls than we often do within them. Sometimes to grow, you got to go. Absolutely. Absolutely. Whether that's by choice or kind of is forced upon you, that's definitely can be true. And it's the people who spend their time ramping up those rumors and panicking rather than taking charge who end up losing in those situations where rumors fly, but nothing happens. I agree with that as well. I have seen individuals who just by their nature are very negative, and it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. By being negative and very vocal about their negativity, I think they set themselves up for failure. So you definitely don't want to put yourself in that position. Okay, how are we doing on time? Probably a little behind. So I am going to start to move a little quicker. So my big thing here is if you suspect it's going to happen, don't panic, prepare. And there are many ways to prepare. A lot of them just have to do with making sure your financial situation is in order. Now is not the time to be taking out a line of credit on something like a car or a house or anything crazy like a boat or anything like that. Get your finances in order. You want to have a good savings if you can. And as far as that PTO balance, if you have some vacation plans, maybe cancel that PTO so you get that bigger PTO payout if you leave. Okay. So let's move on to actually during the layoff. What does this look like, and what can you do? So here's how it may happen. A lot of us aren't in an office setting anymore, but if it's a big group layoff, everyone might be called into a meeting. The meeting might be called something under different pretenses that looks innocent. And then you're informed in that meeting that you're let go. That might happen on an individual basis as well. You may be getting a meeting invite from your manager that looks like an innocent touch base or something like that. Either way, you're going to know immediately what's happening because you enter the room and someone from HR is there. And I can't stress this enough, but it's important in that moment to not panic and let your emotions get the best of you. You're going to be feeling a big range of emotions. And I have not served in the military, and I don't want to downplay anyone or try to pretend like I know what that experience is like to be in combat, but you want to be like a soldier in this situation who has been trained to put emotions aside for a moment and handle the mission. Like I said earlier, this is going to be slightly traumatic, but suppress those emotions, be as cool as a cucumber as you can, and just wait. You'll have your moment, whether you get back in your car, you leave the building, you go into a conference room, you get off the call, which is probably more realistic now with our situation. That's when you can let your emotions out. And the reason I say all that is because the person from HR is going to be giving you a lot of information that you need to listen very carefully to, because you need to know what you need. You need to know if you have any questions. Now is your opportunity to ask. So you need to be very clear in understanding what they're talking about. And it just doesn't do you any favors to lose your cool in this moment, even if you feel like you've been wronged. Just kind of treat this like a transactional thing, and keep your emotions in check is my strong advice. The analogy I thought of was, picture it like your future self came to warn you about something, but the way the time machine works, it only allows them to be here in the present time for 60 seconds. So you're going to be extremely shocked, and you want to ask your future self all these questions, and you're not even going to believe it's happening, but you only have 60 seconds to listen to this important thing they have to say before they leave. So that's the silly analogy I came up with to how it's similar. And finally, the reason I'd say you don't want to lose your cool is just be the bigger person here, be professional, go out with dignity and grace, and don't burn any bridges for future opportunities, because I don't know what's like in your area, but here in Columbus, Ohio, when it comes to the L&D community, it's a very small town. And the chances are that you're going to run into a lot of the same faces at different companies if you shuffle around. And so it just does not make sense to burn any bridges here. Okay, here's where I remind everybody that I am not a lawyer, but I strongly advise everybody to not sign or agree to anything in the moment during being laid off. Mainly because of what I just talked about. You're in an emotional state. You need to have some distance between you and what's happening before you can really be in a state of mind to read the legalese of the documentation they may be presenting to you. And you may actually need to get a lawyer to look that over. There may be some opportunities to actually negotiate some things. So if someone tries to tell you that you can't leave the room until you sign something, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's not true. It should be the opposite. They should be telling you that what your window of opportunity is for you to sign this, how many days you have. But I strongly advise you not to sign anything or agree to anything on the spot. Now, if you're a good negotiator, here's where things might get fun, because here's where you might actually get some leverage, because at this point, before you sign anything, you actually have some leverage, because the company kind of views this whole, or they kind of view you as a liability at that point, because they don't know what you know or don't know, or what documentation you may have been keeping about things that could get the company in hot water. So until you kind of sign away your rights to basically bringing them to court, essentially, over those kinds of things, and waiving your rights to some other stuff, the company can see you as a liability. And you can use that to your advantage, whether you actually have something negative or not, because they just want you to sign that and kind of go away at that point. So what's an example of what I'm talking about, where you can use this as leverage? Let's say in your separation agreement, there's a couple clauses that are helpful. One is a severance package of a few weeks of pay, and the other is some coverage for medical expenses. Something like in the US, we have what's called COBRA. It's kind of like an insurance package that kind of covers people that have been impacted by things like this. Let's say you have a situation where one of those is more beneficial to you than the other. You actually have an opportunity to negotiate. You can say, can I get, for example, additional severance, a few days, weeks, whatever you think you can negotiate of severance in exchange for waiving my rights to this COBRA payment of whatever they're offering. Or vice versa, if you're in a situation where your medical expenses could get to the point where they outweigh what they're offering as a severance, you can do the opposite. This is what I mean by you have an opportunity to negotiate. And I think this is a situation, again, I'm not a lawyer, where it can't hurt to ask, because all they can do is say no, and then you always have that original document to fall back on that you can sign. All right, I'm going to read a few more comments here. Take a little breather. Lots of warning signs. Really good stuff. Someone says the person who's letting you go may be on your side and it breaks their heart to do it. Absolutely. especially if you had a good working relationship, or even a little bit, a good working relationship with your manager, and you feel like you're friends or whatever, it's going to be extremely hard for them in this moment. So that's another thing that can help you to stay cool and focused, is to realize, have some empathy, put yourself in their shoes, and realize that this is difficult for them too. And also that it's just from the business's standpoint, it's just another simple business transaction. It no longer, from their perspective, as much as it stinks for you, or you might strongly disagree, they've made a calculation that it no longer makes business sense to have you employed, and they're doing something about it. It's just a cold, calculated business decision. So seeing it from that point might help as well. Lots of stories here. Thanks, guys, for sharing. Really appreciate it. Okay, we have a perspective of someone from the outside of the US. It says Canada non-compete clauses are very weak. They can't keep you from earning a living. Good to know. All right, so let's move on to moving on. You know, ironically, what I was working on the day before I was let go was I was researching and writing about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And I think those are really powerful things to read up on right about now. If you're not familiar with those, it's kind of like, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's almost like the difference between being pessimistic and optimistic. It's basically a fixed mindset kind of sees things as they are. It's inflexible, it's unchangeable, not in control of their situation. Whereas someone with a growth mindset sees challenges and setbacks as opportunities to improve. And I can't think of a more difficult challenge or more of an opportunity when it comes to your career than being laid off. So having a growth mindset is something that can help. And if you're not familiar with that, it might be something you want to read up on. And yeah, so immediately after a layoff, you want to give yourself some time. Like I mentioned, hold your emotions in check and get to that point where you're free, you're off the call, you've left the building, you've driven off the parking lot, whatever. Now you can let those emotions out, kick, scream, cry, yell, whatever it takes. Just give yourself some time, some distance. Because like I said, you've been through a traumatic event. So recognize it as such. And then my advice would be just kind of relax for a bit. Sit and think about what just happened. Start to process things. Go for a walk, call a close friend or family member, talk things through. At the very least, I would say give yourself the rest of the day off. You might want to just pick right up from there and go. But my advice would give yourself the rest of the day off, and kind of only the rest of the day off, as far as just kind of sulking, for lack of a better word. You just need some time to think and process. I strongly encourage people not to speak with their previous coworkers or anyone at the company for a while. It goes back to kind of, you're in an emotional state and you don't want to have a reputation of someone that, I don't know, you want to preserve your reputation. And at the same time, again, I'm not a lawyer, but there may be something in your separation agreement where it specifically says that you're not going to disparage the company or encourage others to leave. So you have to be very careful there. So the first few days after employment are an interesting time, and it's an opportunity for you to start changing your mindset on some things. The first thing I would recommend, especially for people here in the States, is to file for unemployment. Figure out what that process is like and read things very carefully, and get in the system as soon as you can, because the states are the ones that are handling unemployment, and they're completely overwhelmed by things right now. I'm here in Ohio, and things are absolute chaos. I imagine many states are similar to this. They have a very archaic system that looks like it was developed in 2005. When you fill out forms, there's no back button. So you have to be very careful about everything you're filling in. And if you need to redo something, it's almost like it feels like you're in a giant line at and then to try again, you have to get in the back of the line if you screw something up. So it really sucks, but do your best to figure out what you need to do, and just get it done, and make sure you're filing weekly, even if you don't think you're going to get anything for that month because you're claiming your severance or whatever, because there's additional relief benefits that they're giving out just to people that have been impacted by COVID-19. So get unemployment figured out as soon as you can. And then you want to start to update your resume, your LinkedIn profile, because you're going to want to be looking for new jobs, or you're going to want to pivot to whatever your next career move is. And you want your resume and everything that you're using as your tools to look for your new job to reflect that. So decide if you want to specify, or when you want to specify, that you've been let go. Do you want to share that openly, or do you want to keep that to yourself for now? There are pros and cons to each, so think about that. Had I not been hosting today, I might still kind of be a little hush about it. But I chose to host this, and I figured it was a good time to just kind of put it out there that I was actually let go. And then even if you're quiet about it, definitely when you're asked about it in any kind of interview setting, don't lie. Just be upfront about what happened. If it was due to COVID-19, just be upfront about that. But definitely don't lie and be upfront that, yes, you were let go in an interview setting. Okay, so those of you who have been let go, so what helped you soon after being let go? How did you move on? What did that transition process look like for you? So I'll start to go through some more of these answers here. So some advice people say here is to separate the job and your career. Invest in building the ladder. Absolutely. It's similar to saying you've lost the battle, but you still have the opportunity to win the war. Your career is a long game. And so you can think of your career as the entire game, and the job you're in is like a quarter or a play or whatever. It's part of your career. Move on. Figure out what that looks like. From the business owner's perspective, we do not feel anything but sadness from letting an employee go. I personally feel accomplished when I hire, and I feel like a failure when I've let someone go. That's sad to hear, but thank you for sharing. The job will come and go. We no longer live in a stable job environment that perhaps many of our parents grew up in or on. Losing a job is like losing a relationship. Absolutely. And another perspective we can take on all of this, the global pandemic, having our jobs impacted. I read an article that basically phrased it like the emotions we're experiencing are that we're grieving for a world that is now lost. The world, there will be a new normal. And hopefully we get to a point where it's just some subtle differences that we experience. The same way that after 9/11 happened, we can no longer walk our family members all the way to the airport departure gate, or be there when they come off the plane. That was a difference that was what the new normal became after 9/11. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff like that is the new normal for what we're going to experience. But at the same time, we're grieving what the world was. It's probably no longer going to be the same ever again. And to have a job loss thrown into that mix, you have even more reason to be emotional and to grieve for what once was. The situation is more powerful versus the individual is more powerful. The situation is more powerful versus the individual is more powerful. So I think if I'm reading that right, it's you choose one or the other. I don't know. I don't think and talk well at the same time. Okay. Another one is let the emotions come and wallow in them, then recognize them for what they are. Yes. Later you can recognize them when they come. Yes, absolutely. Always assume best intentions from people, even when they give you bad news. That's true. Assume positive intent is how I've heard it phrased similarly. I think open to remote means more open than it used to. Cast a wide net, yes. And for those looking for jobs right now, I threw this out on Twitter. Unless if you're looking for remote work, if you find a job that's in a different city, unless the job description specifically says we're not accepting remote applicants, and you think you're qualified for the job, just apply for it. Even if it says something about remote temporary until after COVID-19, they might be pretty set on that, but companies are changing their tune so fast that they might have changed their position since the job has been posted. So you can't hurt by applying for things that you're qualified for. Okay. Question in the QA. All right. Awesome. Ruby asks, what are the pros and cons of sharing that you were let go? Can you expand on that? It's just, I've noticed that it just seems to, and maybe this was more of a pre-COVID thing, right or wrong, it just kind of gives you a certain, I don't want to say stigma, but it's almost like it associates something with you where people want to interpret what that means. That, oh, you were let go, you must have done something, or now you're maybe less qualified than a candidate that wasn't let go. So that's on the con side. The pro side, well, yeah, the pro side would be not sharing because you don't want people to think of you that way. The pro side to sharing it and being open about it is that it helps you to move on. You verbalized it. If anyone attended Bob Pike's presentation at the end of the Learning Alchemy 2-day conference that was here, was it last week? Bob Pike had a presentation where he talked about 3 V's. It was verbalize, visualize, and vitalize when you want to kind of embody a change. So the first is to just declare it and say, okay, I'm moving on. The next is to visualize. So it's kind of see yourself. Maybe I'm getting mixed up, but one of those is to see yourself in that position. Another one is to just say it, even though it sounds weird, and to kind of get yourself in that state of mind. And the third is to basically live it and move forward. So here's a good example. There's 2 people. They both decide they want to quit smoking. One says, they're both offered a cigarette. One says, no, thanks, I'm trying to quit. And the other says, no, thanks, I'm a non-smoker. Which one do you think has the better chance of not smoking any longer? The one that says they're a non-smoker, because they're changing their identity to be that of someone that doesn't smoke. So it's the same thing here. This is a big part of, I guess I should change the slide here because we're talking about moving on at this point in the weeks and months after the layoff. So once you decide that you're going to move on and you've decided how you want to pivot, you have the opportunity to decide what your identity is going to be. So much of this process up to this point has been things happening to you. Now is an opportunity to say, okay, now I'm in control of the rest of my destiny. This happened to me, but now I get to say where things go from here, or at least have some kind of control and some kind of say in the matter. Yes, you were let go, but you don't need to continually identify as such. You can frame things differently. So for example, I have been, yes, I'm looking for another full-time job, but I'm also ramping up. I was doing freelance work on the side. So I'm taking this opportunity to be out of work to explore what full-time self-employment looks like. And I'm actually kind of enjoying myself. So I'm reframing things less as that, hey, I was let go from my job a few weeks back, and more as I'm taking this opportunity to explore full-time self-employment. So whatever that looks like for you, if you're laid off, is something you'll have to come up with. But I strongly encourage you to kind of reframe things to help with your moving on process. All right, I'm going to read a few more comments, and then I want to talk about some specific L&D related resources and people sharing insights that could be helpful. Okay, this is actually good. Someone says, honestly, I got really drunk. I got it out of my system. Then I connected with people to find out what I did well, where they felt I should focus, and talked openly about it. It was like 15 years ago. So that's something I almost brought up, and I'm glad this came up so I can say it. If you're someone who has a history of substance abuse, or you're somebody who suffers from depression or has a history of it, or mental illness, you're going to need to be extremely careful. And I'm not an expert in dealing with that kind of stuff, but I just want to encourage you to just hang in there. This is tough, but you can get through it. Whatever support network you have for those kinds of things, reach out. If that's a doctor, whatever it is, just hang in there and leverage your support network. Someone says, hopefully in the new world, when you pass a coworker in the hall and say, how's it going? They no longer say, it's going. I know it's going. That was implicit in my question. I need an adverb. Okay. That's right. I'd love to add that to the new normal. I like that comment. It's a good time to reflect and refocus on what you actually want, to maybe realize you're not ready to start your own shop, etc. That's right. I may get to the point where I realize that full-time self-employment isn't for me, or maybe it's not sustainable. You never know, but I'm glad I have this opportunity where I get to experiment and try it. Another comment is, my advice, it's better to take a break from your professional life and let all the emotions go. Okay. Okay, another person says, don't think about it, just do it. Don't bash yourself up that you may not have one of the qualifications. You likely excel at other things they need. Absolutely. If you match a lot of the qualifications in a job description, but one or two things you don't have, don't let that discourage you from applying. Absolutely. Okay, we have another question in the Q&A. Where did you find these freelance opportunities? That's a great question. So I was fortunate because I didn't get laid off and then the next day decide, okay, I'm going to try to freelance. I've actually been freelancing on the side in my off hours since 2011. So I already had the infrastructure somewhat in place, and I've been contemplating going out on my own for a long time, to the point where I started my own LLC in 2018. So it wasn't just an overnight thing for me. But for somebody starting out, what I'd suggest is to figure out what kind of work you want to do, and then start to research where and start to network with people that would be mostly online right now, where people are getting that kind of work. Are those through job boards because it's some kind of like contracting work, what we call in the US 1099 work, versus full-time employment, which is W-2, those are just the tax forms that are associated with each of those. Or is that finding actual gigs elsewhere through kind of networks, online communities and things like that. So that's how I'd recommend getting started. And it definitely can't hurt to beef up your LinkedIn profile either way for that kind of stuff. Awesome. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to kind of pivot here into talking about what resources are available from an L&D perspective. And let me try and see if I can get into the chat again. I think I can post things, but for whatever reason, I'm not seeing the chat actually happening. Maybe it's because I started so early in the green room. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to start mentioning some resources and dropping some links. So the first one is something that I found really helpful It's a webinar hosted by Lori Niles Hoffman titled How to Pivot, Career Advice for Learning and Development Professionals Facing Uncertainty. And this is, like I said, a webinar recording. I'm going to post a YouTube URL here. I don't know if it actually went in. This is weird. Oh, okay. Kara's offering. So I'm going to put my links in the Google Doc and Kara will post them for me. Awesome. There's the first one. Like I said, that's a link to a webinar that I found extremely helpful. Lori gives the perspective of what has happened in, we're going through something that's really unprecedented, but at the same time, we have past events that we've been through that can kind of give us some predictive capabilities of what we might be able to see going forward, in addition to just kind of guessing at things. And she gives great perspectives of, we've been through the dot-com crash of the early 2000s. We've been through the Great Recession in the late 2000s. What happened after each of those? How did that impact the L&D industry? And what now can we expect after the current situation? So I really found her webinar helpful. And I've noticed she posts some great stuff on LinkedIn. So you might want to follow her there as well. The next one I'll post is, I mentioned it briefly, the Learning Alchemy. They had a 2-day free conference that was hosted here over Crowdcast. It was incredibly helpful. Like I said, it was free. I think you can still maybe go in and register if you haven't, and check out those recorded Crowdcast sessions. They were really helpful. In particular, like I said, Bob Pike I found his session really inspirational and great. Someone else had one that was titled something like what the F is going to happen now, or something like that. From a more high level picture, I thought that one was informational as well, but just so many great stuff that people were sharing in that, and a great way to experience a learning and development conference if you haven't already, for free online. I think we're going to start to see a lot more of that kind of stuff. So keep your ear to the ground for things like that coming out. And finally, I noticed edX just posted a series, I think it is, that they've launched, that they're titling Workplace Recovery Acceleration Program. So they may be offering some stuff there as well that you can take, and it might be helpful for you. So in the few minutes I have left, I'm going to advise people to, like I was kind of talking about, take advantage of this time that you have now. Time is probably your greatest asset right now. What do you want to do with that to pivot into the next part of your career? What does that look like? You have time to figure that out. Take advantage of that time. It's going to be really tempting right now in all your extra free time to figure out what this Tiger King thing is that everyone's talking about, or play this Animal Crossing game that everyone's talking about. You can do those types of things in moderation, but you don't have to be obsessed and purely focused on finding your next job or your career change. But at the same time, you need to find ways to stay productive. So I'll recommend the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. I read that book, and there's so many great pieces of information in that book. And he lays out basically willpower and motivation on its own isn't going to sustain you to have to change your habits and be more productive person. You have to have a good system behind that. And the book is all about helping you find a way to get that system going. I found it really helpful. Lastly, I had something I was going to say, but I missed it. But Kara is telling me there are more questions in the QA, so I will go there instead. So somebody asked, what did I do? Sorry, Joseph, did you do first? I'm guessing, what did you do first when you decided to start exploring full-time freelance work? So like I said, I was on the fence about it for a while, and I always would choose the full-time job. And I just figured I've kind of been knocked off the fence at this point. This is an opportunity to explore full-time work. While this, so I'm pursuing multiple paths to another career path. But I chose to use this time wisely and experience what full-time self-employment looks like. So fortunately for me, I already had one side gig that I was already working on, and I was able to go to that person and say, do you have additional work for me? And they did. And in addition to that, there was another client that I was able to say, hey, I'm available for more work. And currently those two clients are kind of sustaining me right now. If that wasn't happening, I already started a document that goes over who I might reach out to if I'm starting to need to line up more work after this. So that's people I've worked with in the past, or people that I think might have some things that they can share with me, all the way down to just, it might be nice to reconnect with some people. So it's almost like I put them in different tiers of where I think they can be helpful. And I guess my advice there would just be, remember, this is a two-way street as far as being a community and networking. So don't just come expecting things from people. Figure out how you can give back. And it's amazing how much that pays back in dividends. It's amazing. The thing that's blown me away is how many people have reached out to me. I don't think I'm the best networker or anything like that, but I do know that I have a network, and the people that reached out to me to just, if nothing else, just say, I'm sorry to hear about what happened to you. Let me know if I can help in any way. It's just been great. And it's been almost overwhelming. It's just been so positive to have that many people come forward and say stuff. So grow your network and be genuine about it, and give back to what you can. And you'd be surprised how much of an investment that is in your future. Okay. I think I'm going to call it there. We have a couple minutes left. Thank you guys so much. So, actually I have a picture here. I'll just explain it really quick. So one of the ways I'm staying positive, and aside from the job search thing, is I'm expanding my garden. I think a garden is one of the greatest investments people can make right now. It's in mental health, food security, financial security, so many different things. A hobby, a cheap hobby, just garden. And I made my first omelet. I can't believe I've never made an omelet before. I made it about a week ago, and it turned out really good. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe all these years I've been making myself scrambled eggs because I didn't know any better. And all I had to do was look up one YouTube video on an omelet, and look at how beautiful this thing came out with some fresh green onions from my garden. So I show this picture to just kind of show people, you don't know how easy some things might be for you until you actually go out and try it. So if you're down, you've been laid off and you're feeling a little blue, or you don't know what to do next, just take that next step, and you never know how easy it is to make that omelet. So thank you guys so much. Like I said, we'll be figuring out what our next step here is and throwing those up on the schedule. And yeah, keep an eye out for it. And in the meantime, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and stay productive. And I don't know how to end this thing. I don't know if anyone's on here to end this for me. So I'm just going to close out the window, and hopefully that ends it for us. So thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time.